Owain Yeoman and Kang aren't real cops, but they're
TV police!
the TV police.
Blake Neely!
Woo!
I'll be honest with you. I did have a little performance anxiety. I was like, I've sung every week, but I've never sung.
Right.
I've never sung in front of a musical titan like
Right,
Blake
right.
Neely. So, I'm glad I've got
I
that.
can't sing.
You know, well, that's so funny. There is no doubt though that you have a better command of music than me. So that's where my musical
Absolutely, no
talent
doubt.
begins and ends in the
Yeah.
first fight. And Tim can confirm that. Thank you, Tim. What a treat to have you on here, my friend.
I'm so excited.
Thank you so much for
This
being
show
here.
this show was just so dear to me. 7
Yeah.
seasons and fun to hang out. I think I got to meet you guys like one time at the 100th party.
Mhm.
Isn't that crazy? Isn't that?
We worked on this for 7 years and never saw
Yeah.
each other.
We never crossed paths because our work never allowed us to do that, right? And so,
Yeah. And there was that
Yeah.
one party I remember thinking, oh my God, Tim smiles.
right. That's right. Because all you're
we've
seeing is dailies and putting music
Yeah.
to it and never smiling.
It's been a recurrent theme of the TV Police podcast. People have sort of commented on two major things. The first is Cho smiles, and then the second, as a close second, is Rigsby's British. So you can imagine between the two of
Right.
those, we've been causing consternation and enjoying doing it. Blake is an absolute, as I mentioned, a titan of the industry. You know his work from movies such as Greyhound, obviously from scoring The Mentalist, Riverdale, Emergence, Supergirl. We are so lucky to have had you in The Mentalist.
Beyond music, this is a job that no one understands. I mean, I for
Right.
years, my own mother would be like, was that you singing last night on that show? I'm like, Mom, I don't sing. I write instrumental music. And then there's other people that they think how we do it is I just write a bunch of stuff and send it to the show and they put it wherever. And they don't understand, like, I get your episodes with no music in it. And
Well, let's
Watch
clear
it.
the air. Let's
figure it out.
let's talk about this.
I do have to give an honorable mention to your fabulous T-shirt. So Blake did actually show us that he is
Love that.
representing some Mentalist merch. Look at that. That is probably now.
That's the
That
best
might-
shirt.
That might be one of. I'm going to say one of a very few. Right. I don't know if I have a signature Patrick Jane onesie.
Now, what was the story behind that, Blake? Can you fill us in on
It was
getting
like,
that shirt?
I think it was like second season. Bruno gave this to everybody at Christmas or something.
Ah.
All
We
I know
didn't
is
get that.
That year, I dressed as Patrick Jane to take my kids trick-or-treating. I just put on a suit coat, and that was it. It was done.
That's amazing. I love that. Let's demystify the role of the composer, where music fits in. The musical world stands so squarely in the center of what this is and what we do. And I think anyone will agree that any great show, any great movie is really compounded and made by the music. Take us all the way back to, how did you get into this? How did you become a composer? Has it been a lifelong passion for music?
Lifelong, ever since I was, I think, 4 or 5, I started playing piano or trying, and right away just, would make my own stuff up. But the journey here to Hollywood was into the profession of composing is a little bit crazy because I got rejected from music school, which is probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because I said, I'm going to show them and just, put a real fire under me to prove otherwise. But I made it out to Hollywood. I did an internship at the great Disney Studios. And then after college, came out and was working for them at a record company. And a few years later, started orchestrating for some of the best. Michael Kamen, Hans Zimmer, James Newton Howard. And what orchestrating is they write the music, and then I write it out for the different players in the orchestra, for the layman out there. And then I got this call that a friend of mine was at the WB, and it was sort of like the CW. Back in the day.
CW, that's right. Sure, yeah, I remember.
And this young guy named Greg Berlanti was doing his first show, and I put a demo together, and I got the show Everwood, my first scoring ever. And he turned out to be the most prolific producer in.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wonder whatever happened to him.
Yeah. He fell off the map a little bit, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah.
What an unfortunate cart to tie yourself to, because that hasn't brought you any work at all.
No, it was flat awful. In fact, for the first 6 years working with him, he refused to even talk to another composer. And this one season, he's like, "All right, we're gonna have 7 shows this year." I go, "Dude, you need to meet some other people. I love working with you, but
this is not physically possible."
I mean, it's been
embarrassment
so
of
great.
riches
And
there.
through that, I met our dear friend David Nutter, who it was on Greg's second show. He did Jack and Bobby, and he liked what I did, and he pulled me along on The Mentalist.
Wow!
And I got to. I remember driving out and meeting. You guys were shooting up by Valencia, and I got the script, and I drove out and met Bruno Heller, and we had this wonderful conversation about music. And he said, like Bruno does, "Welcome aboard."
Amazing.
So that's how I got to you guys.
The role of the composer to me seems to be one that, does breed that sort of work over work. Do you quite often find that musical sensibility, that taste alignment brings you back to future projects with them?
I think it's a little bit more than that. It's a really hard side for these filmmakers to figure out, because they're taught lighting, shooting, editing, even acting, but everybody knows music, but they panic about, like, how do I make this work in my show? I know I need music, but I don't know what music. So if you've really figured it out with someone down to the point where, like, Greg can say, "I want this to be more yellow," and I'll figure that out for him. Like, if you've got that kind of shorthand.
I've had acting classes like that where they ask me to be more yellow and green and blue and be a tree. So I know what that is. Yeah.
You get it.
Yeah.
But yeah, then you've got a lifelong collaborator, hopefully, because as film composers, we're supposed to be able to do kind of any style. I've got later in my career, I've gotten more to, like, I'm not going to chase that sound. I want to just kind of do what I do. But I think that's what keeps coming back. That, and that I have some really horrible photos on the guy.
That's always useful.
Right.
We spoke to a PA the other day who was saying, I think the only reason that I kept my job was that I had a certain amount of dirt on Bruno Heller. So that's important too. So I think people are more sort of aware, obviously, of the actor's journey to the show. What does that process look like? Obviously, it's very different for you now. I'm sure you're just someone who takes meetings and it's a yes or a no from you. But prior to that, when you were starting out, what did that journey look like? Is there a sort of an equivalent of the audition?
Yeah, we call it demoing. And it's either writing for a specific project or putting together a bunch of music, like a reel, like you guys would put an acting reel together. I hate doing it because there's nothing I've written before is going to work for your project, right? Because it's specific to your project. So I'm always amazed when someone gets a job like that. What I tend to do is say, "Hey, will you send me a few scenes, and I'll happily do them on spec as my demo, and see if it's working." Or send me a script, and that's what I did with Bruno. He sent me a script. I wrote a long piece, and that's kind of how that worked.
So you sort of you work towards a signature sound, then, is basically what you're saying.
For that
because
project,
because The Mentalist, and Tim and I have touched on it a number of times and sung your praises. The Mentalist had such a signature sound, and when I think of The Mentalist, I cannot help but think of your. There is what was the term that we were using, Tim? There was a. That's it. And wow. I mean, you just said it so much better than I could.
My favorite is when you decide to pull out the funky bass lines. That's, during the casino one, I mean, you went off.
We got really funky in the early few episodes because we were
That's what
trying
casino.
To figure it out.
Yeah, because yeah.
I mean, I even calmed it down in the episode we're talking about today. It was even tamed by episode 18. But that's always so hard. I think that every show I've done like 35 series now, which is crazy.
Wow, that is
and
incredible.
Out of that, I've done over 1,800 episodes of television. So that's
that was going to be my next question. Yeah, how many?
That's nuts.
Yeah,
but it's always trying to figure it out. And I think Greg or David said this, that a show really doesn't figure itself out after the pilot until about episode 5.
Yeah.
So you've got 2, 3, and 4 where you're just kind of like, does this work? Does this work? We know the pilot works because we got sold. So there's a little bit of that. And one of it was, I didn't know the show was going to be so funny because the pilot was so serious.
Oh, dark.
Yeah, it was.
I hadn't even planned on that.
Right.
And I forget which episode it was. And I was like, oh, we need some comedy. Bruno was like, can we get some comedy? I'm like, yeah. And out came the funky bass.
Yeah.
I love that. And it became such a, like, I cannot help but think of The Mentalist without that bow, bow, like in the background. It's always there. And creating that sound. Talk to us about that.
I came on while you were shooting the pilot.
So what is that?
I came
Talk
on
us through that.
Sort of that week. And once I got the gig, I just started writing a bunch of stuff that I wanted to sort of find the tone of the show. Sure. And so when I saw it, there was this one scene in the pilot where you guys are going to the command center for the first time with Patrick. And he just had this swagger and I just thought, I'm going to try this thing. And that just became the thing. But that wasn't like my main idea for the show. It's funny. My main idea was very serious and all about this, chasing this Red John forever. And almost every scene that I would score with Patrick, there was an element of sadness because he's just not a happy person. He was always happy, but look what he lost. Look what the tragedy. So I was always thinking of that tragedy. Scoring this show.
And so when you are at this sort of inception phase and you've had that conversation, where do you begin as a musician? Where do you sort of like dig into your toolkit?
The funny thing is that, when you guys are doing a pilot, DGA rules say that the producers can't see it until the director's put his cut together. So and David wanted me to score his cut. So I actually saw it before Bruno did. Isn't that
How
crazy?
funny. How funny. Wow.
So I didn't get to have a conversation with Bruno except for that first meeting in Valencia. And he talked a lot about tone.
Is that sometimes an advantage to come at it fresh with no preconceived notion? Or do you prefer, okay, tell me everything you can about how you want it to be? Or,
Depends on the person. I mean, I'll tell you, let me jump to spotting like how the process works. And I want to tell you something that Bruno told me that I'll never forget. So when we're on a show, we come and we sit with the producer and sometimes the director, my music editor, the editor, and we watch the episode and talk about where music is wanted, where to stop and end in a scene, and what the tone should be for each scene. So it's a long meeting because you're stopping and starting and stopping and starting and discussing. So after about 2 hours, then I go and I have about 5 days to write the episode. Wow. And then we go to the mix stage and everybody shows up and we listen to it and give notes. So the first one we go to, the second episode, I've had the spotting session with Bruno, write my music, go to the stage. And before I said, do you want me to send it to you so you can, listen and give me approval or changes or, anything before the mix? And he said, why would I do that? And I said, well, I mean, that's just normal. Like I send it and people will say like, that's terrible. And he said, well, we sat in a room for 2 hours and I told you what I wanted and you're a professional. So why would I have notes? And I'm like,
oh boy.
Right. Yeah, sounds good.
I better not screw this up.
Never. And man, that is the one thing that makes me work even harder is you give me that kind of free liberty. I mean,
it's really interesting.
And that makes sense with everybody else and every other department and the actors and writers.
Chris Long was exactly the same way.
Yeah.
And it's funny, the democratization that you're describing, it was the same conversation that we had with the writers, and Nina talked about responsibility being taken as well as earned. So when you're in a new project and you're being given this complete free reign, what does that look like? You've got your script, you've had the conversation with the Bruno, for example, in this instance. Where do you begin?
Well, I'm no longer on pencil and paper because we've gotten way too advanced technologically. If you want to, for those who are watching and not just listening, I can show you the
Please.
setup.
Yeah,
The setup
Thank
is
you.
a desk with a piano keyboard, with 3 computers, and then a screen up top showing the movie.
Right.
And so
Very cool.
The process is I will watch the scenes, go to my notes, anything we've talked about with the producers, and then I'll sit here and sometimes just improvise. Sometimes I have a specific idea. I often tell people that, I have a job where I get to work in my pajamas because I literally can wake up in bed and go like, I have an idea for that scene.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I've sent voice memos singing from my car at a stoplight before that I can remember when I get back. So that's the process, and then go scene by scene, and it's rolling, and I'm playing, and then you probably go through a scene sometimes up to 20 times to get all the layers and all that right. So I become very intimate with your work.
Sure.
And,
Yeah.
Very sick of us. Very sick of us is what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we literally worked for like 5 years together before I ever met you.
Right.
And it's like,
Which is crazy.
I'm so used to how you are on the screen.
On screen.
Then it's wild to get to know you as a person.
Right.
And I've found that process so cool. But yeah, that's the process. Then I record it and then I send it off. And it's in sync with the picture. So when it gets to the mix, they know exactly where I started and stopped it. And they have control of different elements if they don't like the piano or don't like the bass.
Sure.
They have control of that.
Who doesn't like that bass? That's what I want to know.
Right.
Oh, can I tell you the most meta thing that ever happened to me?
Please.
Because we're talking about a bass. I'm sorry if I'm scattered. We did this episode where the killer was in the orchestra. I don't know if you remember this. And we had
Vaguely,
yeah. And they filmed it at the Orpheum Theater downtown. And because I'm the music guy, Chris and Bruno were like, "You need to be there." I'm like, "But it's okay. I'll be there. Just be there with us and tell us if it looks like they're really
Hang out,
yeah. So I hang out all day long, and at one of the breaks, Simon is on the stage and he's talking to the bass player, and he goes, "Hey Blake, bass is like Patrick's theme, right?" And they go, "Yeah." He goes, "How do you play it?" So I taught Patrick Jane, the player, see how meta this is? I taught the player of Patrick Jane how to play Patrick Jane's theme on a bass.
Oh my goodness. It's layer on layer. That's amazing.
It was great.
I'm glad you brought up the bass, because I think I might a few episodes have said that our man Blake Neely is not averse to slapping a bit of bass on the Mentalist, and I love that.
Jimmy's episode.
On Jimmy's episode, and boy, does it bring so much to it. And what I love is that you seem to have really accessed from even the earliest episodes the sort of throwback feel. There was something consciously retro about it. Would that be fair to say? But the art too in those early seasons, it had a little bit of a 70s touch to it. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Was that something that had been actively discussed, or was just something you were like, this just feels right?
The one thing that Bruno told me in our first meeting is he said when he was writing the pilot, the song he kept thinking about was Windmills in Our Mind, or Windmills of the Mind. Super old, like 70s classic rock hit. And I don't know if that just got in there, but I didn't try to make it 70s, but it kind of had that feel that Patrick also had. And then there's the Citron. I mean, how are you going to do like this modern or even orchestral sound on the show?
Right.
And then the other thing that I got very experimental with was this idea of hypnosis. Funny that our episode deals with that, but Patrick,
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
Sort of putting you in a mental state, mentalist.
Right.
So there's a lot of pieces like the one where you're being hypnotized on the park bench there's a lot of pieces that are just very repetitive with very simple changes. And my idea was to try to make you, as a listener, well, as the audience, you're not supposed to even notice that I'm doing anything in the scoring, but trying to get you in sort of this hypnotic trance state. So I experimented with that quite a bit.
I think that was really effective, especially in this episode as well. I had to. This is how good it was. I was watching the episode, conscious in my mind, going, "I'm listening to the Blake Neely music." Okay, go.
Have to.
halfway through, I'm enjoying the episode and going, "Oh, gee, I didn't even pay attention to it." Was like it disappeared, and it told the story. And then I went, "Okay, I got to start over again. Listen to the Blake Neely music," you know. And then like 3/4 of the way through, I totally forgot about, you know what I mean? I had to do it a few times, and really it was just so spot on.
I love that I can still do that. Like, I haven't ruined myself on going to a movie, and I hope you guys haven't either through acting. That I can still, it's so magical what we do.
It is.
This is now 24 years of scoring, and I can watch a movie and forget there's music. And it can be like one of my best friends, and I'm like, I don't remember your score. Sorry, dude.
Do you know what's funny, though? I think I actually, it's so funny you mentioned that, Tim. I'd written in my notes that in many respects, and this is a perfect episode in, you know, I wish we could claim some rhyme or reason for it being this episode, but NLP and music, you know, obviously neuro-linguistic programming, which happens to be the subject of today's episode, and your musical score, you are in some way neuro-linguistically programming our viewers. And without even realizing it, we are feeling and becoming sort of part of the emotional drive before anything is even said.
That's what's fun about this job. It's sort of sad to say it's fun to be that manipulative. I don't like to manipulate people.
No, of course.
But the fact that, music is just so crazy to me that sometimes I'll be like, I wrote that and I'm still moved by it because the combination of that with the story, that's the craziness of it. I mean, can you watch yourselves and sometimes forget that that's you up there that you're watching, or is that really impossible?
For me, I don't know that it's impossible. I don't know that I've gotten there before. Yeah. Owen, do you ever?
I think it's is nice.
Yeah. It's a funny, I have a dissociative thing sometimes because I spend the large majority of my career playing Americans. So obviously that's not me. So the level of removal is, you constantly like feel as if you're, I constantly feel as if I'm acting in a foreign language. But it is interesting how much of, just sort of riffing on that theme, how much of you is in each of these, because 1,800 episodes of television. Are you now getting to a point, Blake, where you say, okay, I've got my buckets now. I've got all my buckets. So there's my funk bucket. There's my so-and-so, and I can just, I can pick out little bits and pieces. How does that work?
I refer to it as having like toolkits. I do have little toolkits. I do have little like, okay, if I want to get this reaction, I go to this type of thing. Like that's just something that, but it can get boring. So
do you want to rename it to bucket, like your funk bucket? I
love the idea of a funk bucket.
I like Owen's characterization as a funk bucket. Yeah, toolkit's great. Toolkit's great, but
I just was saying that I have those things if I need, but it can get boring to do the same thing, so I try to change it up and just what I love is putting rules on myself. I'll say like I can only write this way on this project, or I can only use these instruments on this project, or
interesting
stuff like that, or like this project, every character has a theme, or this project no one has a theme. There's like more story themes, like this is the hope theme, and you know what I mean. So I changed it up that way. And
what did that look like for the Mentalist? I'm assuming it started with a Patrick theme. There must have been
Patrick and Robin and Simon had a theme. You and Amanda had a theme. A love theme. You guys didn't have personal character themes. The only person on the Mentalist that had a personal character theme was Patrick. And
Patrick.
then Red John had a sound. And what was fun is I told Bruno when
What
I
was
first
the Red
started,
John sound?
it was a water phone, which is this
Huh.
crazy looking thing you scrape. And Bruno loved it. And at the very end of the series, I bought and gave him a water phone. But Bruno, I told Bruno when we first started, I said, please never tell me who Red John is. He goes, you don't want to read ahead or anything like that. I go, no, because if I know who he is, I will accidentally drop hints in the music. And
How
that
funny.
led to him saying like, okay, but like there was this one episode, it wasn't Red John, but he goes, can you put a little Red John thing there? And I go, I told you not to. He goes, I'm not telling you. I just want one there to mislead. So he was funny like that.
Yeah.
Now, I don't read music.
And
Tim, do you read
he was
music?
calibrated enough to make that sort of a decision then, as far as the storytelling part of it. I mean, that occurred. That let's use music as a hint rather than visually or through text or whatever. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Red John had a sound. Anytime we were talking about his wife and daughter, there was a sort of his tragedy theme. And that always got alluded to, and it's who referred to, I think David Nutter referred to it as laying pipe. It's like you gotta, if in a TV series, if you can do those things kind of all the time, like you said, Tim, you'll forget you're listening to music, but I'll make you know, oh, that's a reference to his daughter, just because it gets in there subconsciously.
Right.
So the Mentalist theme obviously became very, very iconic and inseparable from the show itself. I do know what a massive part of the show's identity that is. Where does that come? Do you sort of score the episode and then find the theme, or is the theme the thing that you start with?
I always like to start and write away from picture first, because I'm guided by picture, the edit, the pace, all that. So I like to get out my ideas. So I wrote this long piece called Believe, which became Patrick's theme. And then the theme itself didn't come until I started scoring the pilot. And it was actually this little funky piece I call travel music. It's like trying to get you from here to here, and there's nothing being said, and there's just like a pan of the bridge. And I got to get you there, because silently it's dull. But they're not the funnest things to write. So I was just kind of having fun with this. And then, like I said, he gets out and walks in, and he's got this swagger, and the very end of that had that boom, boom, boom. And then they sent me the main title card, because we didn't have the main title card in the pilot. It just said The Mentalist.
Sure.
You remember the show used to open with the definition of a mentalist?
Of the Mentalist,
we
mental
talked about
acuity.
that.
Yeah. When did that go away? We're trying to find. Yeah. We're still in those episodes where it's there. I think it died in season.
Let me know when
2 or
you
3,
find
maybe.
it.
Yeah.
I think it was a whole season. And so we got the graphics in episode 2, and I'm like, I just tried that instead of making the show sad, main title or mystery. I was like, let's just throw the fun in there. And that's how that came about. But each episode, sometimes I've started episodes where the first thing I wrote was the last scene. So I kind of knew where I was heading. And I've written like sporadically through the episodes, or I've just gone linearly.
Right.
I did this show for 5 years called You on Netflix. And I would always write that in order and not look ahead, because I wanted to score it from the audience perspective. So I wanted to be surprised by each scene.
That's so funny.
Which was an interesting way to do it.
Have you ever found yourself being on a project where you thought, I don't love this show, but I enjoy writing for it? And does that affect your process? Do you ever find yourself being able to write more easily for shows that you're enjoying, or are there shows that are more difficult to write for?
Yeah, I've for sure. If I love the project, my writing is going to be, I can't wait to get in and do it today.
Right.
But a friend of mine who's a touring musician says you take a gig based on two of three things: the money, the people, or the hang. And so the hang in this case is how good the project is, right?
Sure.
And so I will always find two of those in a project. Either they're paying me crap, but the people are great and I like the project, or you know what I mean? Sure. So even a bad project, I can still get excited to do my job because I like the people, but also, and this is a bit, I guess it's narcissistic, but is to see if I can make the project better just by putting really good music in it.
100%.
And sometimes I've like hated a project, and then after about 3 episodes, like, man, this is the funnest thing to write on, because I get to do this new style and these characters are awesome, but the project as a whole wasn't great. Right. You guys remember we were #1 for like 4 weeks in the Nielsen's in a row? It was nuts. I was like, this thing's insanely popular. Mm-hmm. Well, I have a friend that went to France, and they have two channels in France, like BBC 1 and 2, but it's not called that. He came back, he said, they have 2 channels only in my hotel, and all that's playing on both is The Mentalist. Over and over again.
Love it. That's my kind of TV right there.
Marathon.
Well, my wife's family are French, and we were the #1 show in France for years. So when I got introduced to her family in France, she may as well have been bringing Brad Pitt home. And again, I mean, when you're talking about our voices get dubbed, but the one thing that stays enduring is your wonderful score and your music, and it touches many people in its original form. I do get a huge kick out of being in a foreign hotel room somewhere, turning it on, and then seeing, Tim speaking perfect Slovakian, or whatever it might be.
When you're in Slovakia,
when I'm in Slovakia, I spend a lot of time in Slovakia, Tim. I might not mention it to you, but on the down low. But it is the one thing that is universal about music is that it does transcend language, and I think that the one thing that really is universal about The Mentalist is this incredible signature soundtrack. And is it hard to vary those sounds? Do you find yourself defaulting to a certain Blake Neely signature sound? Or?
I always say, we only have 12 notes. So the fact that we're still coming up with new music today is crazy. So we have so many instruments. I can make my own instruments now. You can do all kinds of stuff to keep it fresh. But I always say about scoring, especially a television show, is we're not repainting the sets every week. So why are we going to change the music that much? It becomes comfortable, and the more it stays the same, the less people listen to it, and they're watching you guys. So I was always a big fan of keeping the sound the same.
It's formulating that musical language for that show, and then speaking that language throughout the life of the series, right? Over and over. And
exactly. And you get like a new character or like, you have a new storyline. It gets a whole new thing, but it stays in the sort of the same fabric.
Right?
The same material. But then we moved to Austin in season 6.
Yes.
We moved to Austin, and Chris and Bruno said, "Might should give it a different sound." And I was like, "Oh my god, it's season 6!
You got to learn a new language."
Yeah. And so I made this new sound for the first one, and episode 601, and then by like 604, we were back to the old sound. I'm like, cool.
That's so funny.
We're not doing it.
Before we move on, the funniest thing that ever happened to me in television was on The Mentalist, and we go to the spotting session of season 6, the finale of season 6, and there's the freaking run to the airport. There's the slow motion kiss in the police station. We go to the mix. We actually had champagne. Thank you for wonderful 6 years on our show. I did the big theme swell, like we are ending this series. And a week later, they called and said CBS wants the 7th season. I was like, oh my god!
Bring it down a bit. Yeah. Time for a redo. That's so funny. That's
hilarious.
You talk briefly.
I had a quick thing before we forget the theme song.
Yeah.
The first bit of music that we hear, you've touched on that. How many iterations did that go through?
Well, like I said, that bing 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 bum bum bum. That all came from the end.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah. You gotta do the bing 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 bing.
Yeah. Can you still? I'm gonna put you on the spot, Blake. Can you still remember it? Can you still play it?
I can just play. But all that other stuff is layered in like a synth.
I love it. I love it.
Car keys shaking. The shaker in that is car keys because he was so attached to his car, the Citroen. Little things like that. There's marimba.
But you knew that attachment for the theme song from the beginning?
Yeah, he had that citron from the beginning, didn't he?
Yeah, no, he did.
That's amazingly incisive to have that.
On that. Well, no pun intended.
Those are like the little tricks I look for. Yeah, those are little tricks I look for.
Now, Simon was always very involved with, and obviously more and more involved as the series went on to direct and obviously produce in the latter seasons as well. Did you guys ever get together and talk about the sound of the show, or did he ever sort of...
Hang on, real quick. I wanted to go back. How many iterations was it, Blake?
That was probably...
How many versions of the theme song came out before, okay, here it is. This is what we hear and have heard for 20 years. What was the...
Oh, I took it from this cue that I'd written for an episode, a little traveling music.
Right.
And I probably worked on that over and over without anyone hearing it, just for myself, probably 6 versions of it until I got it right.
Yeah.
And then you go, well, I don't know, maybe it'll stand the test of time. And that particular one, because we ran for so long, it was like, and they never changed it. Yeah. Even when that's the one thing when we went to Austin, they're like, can we change the sound of the show, but don't touch the theme? I'm like, okay. That's always fun.
Funny. Yeah.
But it's hard because that's when that's sort of, I tell students that the worst thing you can hear is, can you give us something iconic? No, I can't.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, it's like saying to, it's like saying to, can you just do an Oscar-winning performance right now?
Yes, can you please?
Right. Just right now, that would be great. Yeah, sure. Here comes an Oscar-winning performance.
Coming up.
One of the things that we've repeatedly talked about is how now in 2026, 20 years longer since the start of the show, how much has changed in the television landscape? How much has changed in the technological landscape? How much has that impacted the work that you do? What does that look like now versus when you were doing the show in 2008?
I think we have some fantastic television these days. I mean, from cinematography to acting to storytelling, it's fantastic. What hasn't changed for me is they still don't give me enough time. I still only get a week.
Yeah.
And
I thought you were going to say enough money. They still don't give me enough money.
Oh, no, I'm filthy rich. No. I still don't get enough time. And I have to fight for literally the money if I want to record it like with an orchestra. I have to fight for it because what you do on your computer sounds fine. Like, it's so much better, and people are hearing this and great. And that's what has changed is when we were doing my first few shows, it's like everyone was only watching it on a TV. So, and you couldn't turn the channel and the Avengers be on the next channel. So now, I mean, as soon as Mentalist came in, I remember thinking people are going to watch this on the same place that they watch Superman, right? So the music better be up to snuff with that. Better be just, because a lot of older television, it's ins and outs and it's mixed in mono. And I was always from our standpoint, like I want to go cinematically. And I think television caught up in the way of being just it. Television is so cinematic now. I love it.
It really is, and I think it's only going to become more so. Who were your musical heroes? My first job, I did the movie Troy, and I remember music being such a huge part of that. And I want to say it was it Hans Zimmer ended up? James Horner, thank you. It was James Horner. And there was a conversation about Hans Zimmer doing it at some point, and maybe it ended up being James Horner.
Horner had to take over from. I won't mention who did get fired. It wasn't Hans, but he did get this one composer got fired, and James had to write that in something like a month. It was just this.
I remember that.
Yeah,
I remember that, and I remember it being such a this was my first job out of drama school, and I was just so overwhelmed by the scale and the scope of it. But on top of it, one of my most vivid memories was there was a piece of musical.
Were you also overwhelmed by the hair of it? Was that one of your? If you remember your hair in that movie, were you overwhelmed by that as well? There was
quite a lot of hair. The flowing locks. I mean, I look like a latter day.
Is he like flowing?
What's that?
I gotta go watch.
Oh,
yeah, I will. Going off.
I'll send you a little something. My
yeah,
wife
he looked like
describes
Chris
me as
Cornell
like,
from like Soundgarden days. I mean, his hair
it's
down to
interesting
his waist. Yeah.
Gigi described me as a hot Jesus. She said, "You look
There
like
you
a
go.
hot
Yeah.
Jesus,"
Nice.
and I was like, "Okay, I'll take it." You know. But we had this incredible piece that was playing in the on set, and it was two wailing women singing, and it was a very throwback piece. And I remember just getting goosebumps and thinking, that to me was the moment where the whole project began to come to life, when we had playback playing and they were playing that music too. So when all those elements come together, it is just extraordinary. Who were your musical heroes growing up? Obviously, at the age of 4 or 5, already taken to the piano, you clearly came from a musical family or a musical background.
I have the very, very specific moment that told me what I was going to do. And I was 8 years old. And up to that point, I was kind of a classical music geek. I would listen to my parents' records, classical records by all the dead Germans and fake conduct and all this stuff. I go to see Star Wars at 8, and I sit there, and I'm like, well, I've never heard this music before. And my mom said, well, that's because they wrote it for this music. And I go, that's a job? So John Williams got me going. Michael Kamen was my hero because he brought me on board. He was the first composer I worked for. He did for the lay people, Robin Hood, Mr. Holland's Opus, Baron Munchausen. And then I got to work with another hero, which was Vangelis, who scored Blade Runner, Chariots of Fire.
Yeah, my goodness.
Which then led me to Hans Zimmer, because Hans Zimmer was a big fan of Vangelis and said, who are you working with? And which then led me to James Newton Howard. So of all these, I mean, these were my heroes, and I've gotten to
that's not a bad roster of folks to have.
I've gotten to sit and have wine with them. I've traveled with them. It's like
extraordinary.
Go, wow, music did this. So
I thought being a choir boy was amazing, but the one thing that I do remember years and years and years ago is the sound of the organ. And that church organ, it literally reverberated in my body, and I can still remember that sense memory, that feeling. Music is so
bad memory.
No, memory? A good memory, but you resonate feelings and you understand what a feeling is. And to this day now, when I go back into a church and I hear an organ, it does take me to a very, very specific childhood place. So the evocative power of music is such a huge thing.
That's why I asked if it's a good memory or a bad memory, because I've had the same thing, but it's a bad memory. You know, it's like I got to turn that off. I cannot.
Right.
I've had directors be like, "Oh my God, you cannot use flutes," and I'm like, "What did a flute do to you that you have such PTSD when you hear it?"
Right.
So it's so specific, But we've had it around us since the day we popped out. You know.
Do you find that there are moments when you're writing something and it becomes accidentally sort of a little too personal, or because you must take, like we do as artists?
I find myself rewriting myself, which is horrifying. It's like,
that's interesting.
I spent one day I was doing The Mentalist. I think we were in season 6, and Arrow had started, and I have templates for each show so that it sounds the same as it did. And I spent an entire day scoring The Mentalist using the Arrow themes, and I was like, my God, what did I just do?
How did it sound? Was it any good?
Weird.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But would that have been something that would be instantly recognizable to someone like myself who wasn't, because I heard you talking earlier about musical cues and saying, well, don't tip that it's so-and-so who's read John. I think I could comfortably watch the episode and be completely ignorant of a musical cue.
Probably. But I knew I'd done it.
How funny.
Right.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. I'd love to dive into
a bit of trivia before we move on, talking about this episode and musicians. One of the guest stars, Bodie Elfman, his uncle is Danny Elfman of Oingo Boingo. So just a little 6 degrees there for
them too.
For the musicians.
Did you really?
Yeah, and my son ended up interning with him. So,
oh wow!
But who does he play in this episode?
He plays Rick,
the guy.
Teagler?
Yeah, Rick Teagan. Rick Teagan. So he's the decoy guy who gets accused and then gets released on bail. Yeah. I remember him being.
He's Danny Elfman is his uncle.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
how funny. And Jenna Elfman, the actress, is his wife.
Yes.
So the episode Russet Potatoes, season 1, episode 18, and like I said, a really great one to bring you in. The persuasive power of music and neurolinguistic programming actually dovetail very, very nicely together, and I think that there is an opportunity.
It really did, and it's also what I was telling you earlier, which is we were done with the funky, and we were getting very serious towards the end of that first season.
Yeah, and Blake, don't ask me anything specific about the music because I don't remember.
I know you said.
I have no idea.
Well, he's actually performed something of a mind trick on you, Tim.
Yeah.
What he's done is he's programmed you by the end of the episode to forget everything.
One of the park bench scene is absolute gold. You, Owen. And the other scene that I love in this episode, and I'd forgotten it, was the interrogation. Tim, when you go, you like to drink? You have a little drink? You are so I couldn't figure out if you were playing just stern or caring. There's both elements of it. And I remember that scene now talking with Bruno, and he's like, we don't need music. Just let them act. So you gave me half a day off. Thanks.
There you go.
You know why? Because this is Cho when he's stern. And then this is Cho when he's caring.
There you go.
Right? Did I get that right, Tim?
It's a great scene, though. It's a great scene.
Nobody owns the interrogation room better than my dear friend Tim Kang as Kimball Cho. And I think being able to give that scene room to breathe is a wonderful decision. How quickly are you let in on the breaking storylines? How long does that take to sort of percolate to you? Because you touched briefly on, I'm not given enough time. What does that typical time cadence look like? We film an episode in 7 or 8 days. So then what does it look like in terms of when it's handed over to you? How quickly do you have to get everything up and running?
I have to have it back to the mix stage. Usually it's 7 days after we get it. Wow. So I'll receive it on a Monday, we mix on the Monday, or whatever, Thursday to Thursday. So it's
is the episode done by that point? Is the episode already finished?
Done. Yeah, it's done except for sound and music and any ADR. But what I love about the job, what scares me is if I don't have an immediate idea. It scares me. If I'm starting a new project, I'm very visceral. So as soon as I see it, I'm like, oh, I know what I want to do with this. And in this particular episode, it's when you kissed Amanda finally. So I love that moment. And Tim won't remember this because he didn't hear any music. But in 2 scenes prior to that, you're talking to her, and I introduced the theme that I'm going to use which became your love theme when you actually kiss her. But I introduced it 2 scenes earlier so that it wouldn't just be this, what's that? Oh, the human brain can go, I connect it back to this is their thing. And then I'm
going to have to go back and watch it now because now that you're giving me all of this juice, it's like Tim said.
There's a little marimba, they go, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I do that very quietly in one scene, and then you go up to kiss her, and just before you kiss her, you hear that play again. These are just little tricks.
I love that. And then it already feels familiar. I thought there was a wonderful device, obviously hypnosis, the power of persuasion. This is something that has been from day one a big part of The Mentalist. We saw it for the first time become an overt theme rather than a sort of suggestive theme. We'd seen up until now episodes where Jane's hypnotism or his tricks had sort of slightly slapstick or maybe, funny ends. This was the first time we'd seen hypnosis used for true bad, for, being able to convince someone to kill someone. And, it also gets to a point where Rigsby is very, very impressionable and very, very, under the influence and could have done terrible things by the end of the episode. My word for this episode, can you see that? Impressionable. And underneath I wrote trauma, but impressionable was my first word. And I used that word because as Owen, I'm not particularly susceptible to things like NLP or, and I've wanted to be, I will say this now as a personal confession. I went to a hypnotist to try and quit smoking years ago. In the end, I just quit, but it just didn't work for me because I was so aware of the process.
Yeah.
Have you ever had any run-ins with hypnotists?
I really want to, but I think I'd be the same. It's like with therapy. Like I kind of, I've done so much, seen so many storylines in television and movies that like I know how therapists work, so it doesn't really work because I'm like, oh, I know why she's asking me that question. And I think with hypnosis, they're gonna be like, watch this going back and forth, and all I can think is I'm watching this going back and forth. I'm not gonna fall under.
Watch.
Right.
Yeah.
And it is
Rigby takes hypnosis on the shoulder. Talk about susceptible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, Rigsby really was. I kept thinking of the character Lurch. Do you remember Lurch? Like there was this, like this, the bit where he's dragging the body at the end up, and I actually grabbed Jane and try and put him over the end of the building. But what was interesting, Tim, I thought, was the line where they said that you can only persuade someone to do something that's already in your psychological makeup. And Rigsby has a brutal streak. And I thought, that was exactly what you were talking about a couple of episodes ago. And it is interesting that, I think about friends of mine who've ended up going into the police or the armed services, the armed forces. Quite often, those people, have channeled a brutal streak into a more authoritarian and for good way. And I think that that's interesting because Rigsby has this criminal background, and we get to explore that years later. The father's part of a biker gang, and, that's, I think, Cho has a little bit of trauma and a little bit of the background. And what I love about this episode is that it's one of the first episodes where we're really beginning to peek behind the curtain of all of these characters.
Yeah.
As the characters evolve, do you then find yourself? So, obviously Patrick was the only one who had a theme of his own, but do you find yourself evolving the sound in tune with the themes and in tune with the storyline?
Yeah, and sometimes it devolves because sometimes it'll be like, oh, it's too complicated, and now that I know them, I'm going to simplify it so I can start stripping things away to where it's like, play that one note piano thing, and that's kind of all you need because this person's so deep and we understand them now. So that's fun too to go the other way.
Strip away things, yeah. Do the musical cues vary from episode to episode a lot, or is it mostly, 15 cues or 20 cues?
In the Mentalist, because the Mentalist it did because it was both a procedural and what's the other kind? Linear.
Linear, yeah.
So we had the linear aspect of his backstory and what happened, the tragedy. So that would evolve and kind of be the same, but then we always had a new guest star, and they were always in a different place. And I remember there's this one crazy one where they're like at a cabin somewhere, and so those kinds of things would evolve, and then the character things would kind of stay the same. But I was looking for you guys, and I ended up doing 4,438 pieces over the 7 years we did it.
Wow.
I know.
That's extraordinary.
And
that is extraordinary.
A single one of them, except the first part, but that's okay.
I heard 400. Yeah, I heard one out of the 4,438. Yes.
He was deeply persuaded by it. He just doesn't know it. He can't remember it. That is amazing.
Every episode has like 40 scenes, and sometimes there'll be a couple of pieces in a scene, and I forget how many episodes we did, but it's a lot.
And that's a lot.
Are you a sort of are you someone who thinks musically? Like if you were to be given a piece of music that you'd written for a specific episode, would you be able to? Would that take you back to that place?
Yeah. Or I'll remember. It's just like what was playing on the radio during your first kiss. Like it'll take you back.
Right.
So if it was meaningful, if it was like a really good, like spotting session, like that hypnosis scene, seeing it again. you on the park bench took me back to the conversation I had with Bruno. That was a happy thought. I remember thinking during Russet Potatoes, this episode, I remember thinking, oh my God, I cannot wait. We get to do the season finale in 2 weeks. And this show's really figured out. We were like number 1 at that point. It was, we knew we had a season 2 coming up.
Yeah.
So yeah, very good memories.
That's always a nice feeling.
That park, by the way, the park where Van Pelt and Jane and Rigsby were, that was right by my house. I took my kid to that park
Really?
almost every single weekend. Yeah, it's Woodbridge Park right there on Moore Park.
Was it really?
Yeah.
That's so fun. Studio City? How funny.
I feel silly for this word, but for some reason,
not at all.
This episode made me think of this movie.
There you go.
Wow. What are the odds of that? After
because it was like, at first I thought where it was going, even when I rewatched it, was one was hypnotizing another, and it felt just like, you know, you're putting someone further under and further under, like you were double hypnotized in one scene.
Sure. Yeah.
Rigsby was. Yeah. So that's why I put Inception.
Nice.
Oh, I love that. What's your word, Tim?
Yeah, mine wasn't quite as grand as that. And this week I actually did use 2 words. So my first one is, and it's a throwback as well to the last episode with Dano, but it is hair gel.
Uh-huh.
Oh my God, I almost put that.
Yeah. And Blake and I would have had what Owen has been wishing for is fun. Yeah.
You guys, it's fine because I look back at it now and I'm like, what was going on with my hair? What was I doing in those early seasons? But it was funny
because Dano brought it up first in the last episode. I didn't even notice it in that episode, and he brought it up. Yeah. And then this episode I'm watching, and I totally noticed it in this episode. So,
you guys,
that's the word for that. And then the other word is a little bit more
unrequited. Yep,
focused on
unrequited hair gel. That's so funny. I will say this, guys. It gets way worse. I think right around season 4 or 5, I get divorced in real life, and my hair just goes wildly off the reservation. Okay. So
crazy.
I discover pomade in a new kind of way, and it's it's terrifying.
My hair was Tim's color when I started The Mentalist.
Is that what we did to you?
Yeah. That's television.
Is that what 4,438 pieces of music can do to a man?
Yeah, gone.
Oh, well, your hair's loss was our gain. And what was your family background? Was it a musical family? Were they shocked, horrified, elated when you said that you wanted to?
My mother was musical. My sister and I were musical. My dad was a farmer and then became an English teacher. And I told him I wanted to be a musician, and he said, well, you better have a backup plan. And so I get to college, I get rejected from music school, and I'm like, what's my fastest way out of here? And the counselor said, well, you've taken a lot of languages. Why don't you major in linguistics? How's that for the episode you said?
Right.
So I call my dad back, and I go, all right, I'm majoring in linguistics. He goes, that's not a backup plan. I said, I know. I'll make it.
Amazing. Yeah. You've replaced the backup with a backup.
I tell people this, it's sort of cheesy, but they call it playing music. They don't call it working music. So I literally play all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's an honor to be able to do that. And it's an even bigger honor then to be able to do it alongside people like yourself who are so good at what they do.
Well, I just appreciate that you guys appreciate score, especially on the day after the Golden Globes dropped score from the broadcast. Did you see that?
That is outrageous. That really is outrageous. But I feel like the whole
why?
I don't know if that's I think that's more of a commentary on where award shows are these days, to be quite honest. I watched a horrendous thing the other day. It was either a SAG Awards footage or the Globes, I can't remember. And they gave this guy who was winning the best foreign language film, they gave him the award on the red carpet. And his face was like, what? I don't even get a moment in the auditorium. It's like, and they're like, you don't know, but we're going to give it to you now. And it's like, this is embarrassing. It's just awful. Talking of, awards, do those things matter to you? Is it important? Is it nice to be recognized? You can be candid and honest with us.
It was absolutely mind-blowing when I won the Emmy.
Yeah.
And it was just
Tell us a bit about that. What did you win the Emmy for?
The flight attendant. Main title for the flight attendant. And everybody seemed to love the score, and it was, groundbreaking, all that. That just came out of a crazy pitch. I was pitching to like these 5 producers, and they go, "What's your idea?" And I said, I'm thinking this, and then the one producer said, "Can we have percussion?" And I said, "What if it's only percussion?" Because I love to put rules on myself. And they go, "You're on." I get in the elevator, and I'm like, "What did I just do to myself? I can't do an entire score with percussion.
No melody, no, yeah.
I'd like to write this whole theme tune with just spoons.
So I'm just dragging myself to my car, like, oh, and then I went, "Wait, a piano is percussion. Oh, wait, this is percussion. Oh, wait." So it became fun. I loved winning it. I will not be one of those people that says it doesn't mean anything to me. It meant a lot to me. And the recognition, because it's voted on by your peers, was incredible.
Yeah.
But I don't put any effort into those things. I mean, I'm never going to campaign for one, or, it's just, I got it. It's great. And I love it and I appreciate it, but it's not why I do it. I love writing music, and I love writing for picture.
And I think that's...
We got to do another show together.
We do. What is our next show, Blake? Tell me.
3 of us.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't want to insert myself into your duo there. So,
how early into your career were you on The Mentalist? Because that was something I quickly wanted to touch on. We were all so green. You must have had quite an established... You'd done quite a few things already.
Right?
2007, 2008 was when we started. Yeah.
So I was 6 years into my career.
Right. So still relatively early, right?
It feels early. And I'd never been on a show that ran that long. I have since, but that was unreal. And this other thing, you asked me, do I like television? People ask me, "Don't you want to do movies?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do movies." But what I love about television is, I'll say to my friends that do movies, I'm like, "Great, you worked for how long on those themes, and now they're gone. Like, you can't do anything else with them." I get to bring those kids to work with me and mold them and change them and really get into a character and
grow them.
You have 7 years on your character, and that's what I love about it. And then,
it's a different...
eventually hit a point where you're like, this show needs to end.
Sure. Yeah. It's, it's a fast twitch versus a long twitch muscle. It's funny. And how much did you feel... Are there creative handcuffs that come with your process? Do you like, okay, here's the brief, great, I'm off to the races.
Not like you guys get. Like, I remember Bruno saying that they're like, "How long do we have to do this Red John thing?" Like, really? It's the basis of the character. And they finally just was like, "All right, we'll kill him off." But no, I don't get that. I sometimes get, I don't know. I mean, I'm just so lucky now later in my career with the long history that I kind of just get to do what I want. But it gives me real drive to work harder. If you just stood over me saying, "Do this, don't do this," and I'm like, But if you give me free reign, I will swing for the back fences.
I think every artist feels like that. So you've got boatloads of cash.
On ARA, I will bring my funk bucket.
Well, I was just about to. It's a given.
That's the most appropriate bucket. So
the only concern we have is whether we can afford you, Blake. I mean, it's a given that you are our only choice.
Right.
But I was just going to say, you have your bucket loads of cash, you have your bucket full of funk, you have your awards, and you have a storied career that any musician would, give a limb for.
Also, have a great studio in North Hollywood, not far from you. Well, it's far from town. But
we would have to come
sometime.
Yeah, for sure. I keep trying to persuade him back into town.
The best bar in North Hollywood is in my studio. So
perfect. We love that. It sounds like the perfect place to work.
And you can sit on the bar and look at Red John hanging on the wall.
Oh, I'm all over.
Bruno gave me that at the end.
Nice. Just name the time. What still excites you? What is the thing that gets you up in the morning, and what are challenges that maybe you haven't had the opportunity to take on that you would love the opportunity to take on?
I haven't done everybody almost always says this, and I know in your world too, I haven't done a period piece in a long time.
Interesting.
I did I did Masters of the Air in the Pacific, so those are a period piece of a sort. But I'm talking like, let's go back and like my friend Ludwig is scoring the Odyssey right now for Nolan, and that sounds so much fun, right? So that would be fun. I think what I get excited about is, can I do it differently today? And my job is literally a puzzle. It's like you have this, and it's a puzzle of how do I figure out what tempo, what tones, what instruments are going to make this work, or do I just leave this scene alone? So it's the puzzle, and like you said, Owen, it's like we get to make things.
Yeah.
I mean, if I got up every day and went out, and if I were a woodworker, I'd get excited to go work with wood, but I just happen to work with these piano keys.
It is a gift. And, you know, Tim and I have often talked about just the gift of being in front of the camera for 100+ episodes. That to me, I can't remember who said it. I think it was Erica Green Swafford said, we got to go to Mentalist University. And I think that's a really, really wonderful way of describing it. Because how many, you know, and I doubt any of us will have the opportunity to do a 7+ year run nowadays, just because of the way that TV has changed.
Especially
how
not
has
22 a year.
Right. And, you know, those shows are sort of bygone shows. Are you being asked to sort of turn around your art in a different or quicker way now because of the constraints of newer modern television?
No, it's the same amount of time. They give us the same amount of time. They want it cheaper. You know, if it's like, I need an orchestra for this. That's what the sound is. Okay, but can you do it with just 12 musicians? I'm like, no. So, but there's a compression, and I don't put up big fights for it, you know, because there's other ways to do it.
I think Nina mentioned something similar in terms of you know, working episodic television on a network versus maybe working in HBO. Is that when you get on set, it's the same exact thing.
Yeah.
You know, you just have more money and maybe a little bit more time, but it's the action of it, the movement of it is the same.
Yeah. Do you do any different acting on a movie set than you do on a TV set? It's like, I'm on a movie today. I'm about to do my movie acting. Yeah, sure. Or they'll just phase us all out and bring in the AIs. So there's that too. How much on the subject of AI? Is there any AI in the work that you do now?
No. If I were to have anything AI in the studio, it'd be for like tasks that are just like bummer tasks to have to do. You know, almost like we use GPS on the phone, right?
Sure.
But I told these students, asked me the same question. I said, look, I sign an indemnity contract with the studio. Like, I indemnify the studio in case there's a copyright breach, right? I rip John Williams off and he sues the studio. They actually sue me. So and all AI music is stealing bits of music on the internet and making it. So if I used one of those, I'm liable to be sued by hundreds of people, and that's on me, not the studio. So that's my take on, and also it's no fun, you know?
Well, sure. I mean, I think
it's funny. Like my friends and I've made some funny things with AI, just throwing them back and forth. But it's no fun. Like, I like to find those notes.
Well, you're taking the creator out of there. What is that old adage? Good artists borrow, great artists steal. Have you ever heard of that? And you know, do you find yourself unwittingly or consciously, and how much bandwidth do you have to be able to borrow sounds? So you're like, I'm super inspired by this, because I know there are certain performances where I'm like, I would love to be able to emulate that. Then try your version of it, you know?
Well, I have over the years, you know, my studio is big, and we have kind of a team, and I've always told people that come on to work with me, like, I don't need any yes men. Like, never. If you think I've ripped somebody off, walk in my room and tell me, like, hey, that sounds like Interstellar. Oh, okay, thanks. I'll change it, because I'm moving so fast. But I do have a crazy memory for lots of music, so I'm sure I've ripped people off. I mean, I know I ripped John Williams off one time and had to write an apology letter.
Did you really? How funny. Were you that conscious of it?
Oh my God, it was a little too late. Like, we like, it actually aired, and so So what they do is you have this licensing sheet that keeps track of who wrote everything. So I just gave him that cue on the licensing sheet, so he'd always get paid for it, royalties wise. But I did write him an apology letter through his agent, and what I heard back from his agent was, "Oh, I'm sure he did a very good job of ripping you off." What a good guy!
I'm sure. I'm sure John has got an equally large funk and money bucket.
Yeah,
and I'm sure he's.
okay with the box.
I'm sure John has a stack of apology for being ripped off letters.
Right.
That's so funny.
He's written
That is
everything.
so
Everything.
But yeah, that's definitely why I wouldn't use AI. Is fear and fun.
Sure. Yeah, taking the creating out for sure.
This will be. You guys will want to wear this everywhere.
So this
okay, all right. So we're gonna open. And this instantly puts Blake into some. This instantly puts Blake into some hallowed guest quarters because he's only one of 2 people who've brought us gifts. So immediately, top 2.
I wouldn't call it a gift yet.
Wait until you see it. Okay, here we go. All right. I mean, I'm going to say that this is wonderful.
Owen always tears open the gift.
I'm like a kid. I'm literally. I can't wait.
Tim on Christmas.
He's such a grown up.
3.
This is amazing.
1.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
How funny is that?
Boom.
I love it. I love that.
And
you know what?
Let me tell you the story behind it.
This is amazing. I'm going to wear this every day.
I never could on television get a front card credit, right? But
really?
Over time, I got to a point where I got the very first credit at the end of a show, and it was on all my shows.
Right.
And my son found this meme, and the meme is this guy's watching the end of an episode, super excited, then music by Blake Neely, and he's like super disappointed. And it became a meme. And it's just a black screen with music by Blake Neely, and I just said, "I'm making hats."
That is amazing. Well, you know, you are very much of the same school as my wife. Every time she's an entrepreneur, and every time she is floating a company logo or testing an idea, her acid test is, would it look good on a hat? And I've got to say, this looks great on a hat. So
phenomenal.
You know, I will clock the looks of disappointment as we walk down the street where they're like, music by that guy.
And you know what I appreciate?
The flip side of that, though, is I've actually gotten hate mail. People will be like, "Why'd you kill this person?" I'm like, I just wrote the music. Man.
Yeah.
Also, what I love about this hat is that it goes a long way to show the giant disparity between my oversized head and
I was
Tim's
just
head.
going to say that. That's hilarious. I was going to say,
I know you were.
I don't have it on right now.
Hilarious.
But the fact that it fits Owen's head, I know it'll fit my head. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
If it fits
we
me,
both have giant heads.
7 5/8, which is every time I go for a costume fitting, people are like, "That's unheard of. I don't know what's wrong with you." This has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much
fun.
For your time.
I knew we'd have fun because I knew how you guys were and had listened to some, but this was just a blast.
It really was, and thank you for giving up your time. Can we please
work together?
I would love that.
Find a way to hang together.
Let's please do that, and let's unofficially pencil in a date for a visit to the Blake Neely bar,
Blake
where
Neely
I promise you we'll be wearing our signature hats.
Oh my God, please!
I would love that.
Let us know when you're in the stateside, Tim.
Thank you, Blake. Yeah, definitely will.
Amazing.
Thanks so much, guys.
You be well, my friend. Yeah. Thank you so much. Join us next week for another episode of The TV Police.